Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Koshelski, and I'm an alcoholic. And I am very pleased to be with you today. I always feel grossly unqualified being in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and doing this. And the truth is I've had an experience, and I'm uniquely qualified to do this. But I know I have big shoes I'm stepping into, and just really, really grateful for this opportunity. My sobriety date is May 2nd of 2015. It was not on purpose. It accidentally happened. And are we good? Okay. And that was by accident. That was not on purpose. And I will get to that as a first step experience, right? And I have a sponsor. He knows he's my sponsor. He encouraged me to come here today, and because he knows I'll show up today, right? I've had an experience with this deal where the easier, softer way is to say yes. It is to show up and to do what's being asked of me. I have a home group. It's Tuesday nights in Carbondale, Colorado. It's called the Down Valley Derelicts Group. And if you're ever in Colorado, we would love to have you. It's a wonderful experience. And I have a service commitment at the group. And I tell you all that because I need to let you know that I did not do that at one point in my sobriety, right? I was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous who really barely went to Alcoholics Anonymous and really didn't participate, right? And I was a fringe member, and I didn't really want you to know me, and I didn't want to know you. And it seemed easier that way. But, I will qualify. I'll spend a few minutes real quick qualifying. So my first drink was when I was 9 years old. I used to think my first drink when I was 15, but this memory popped in where when I was 8 years old, I come from a big Italian family, and my great uncles were sitting around the table, and they broke open some of my grandfather's port. And I had no idea what was going on, but I got this experience where they put a little port in the glass for me and let me try it because I asked what it was. And I got to try the port, and whew, man, was that wonderful, right? It didn't feel good. It didn't taste good. I didn't get drunk. I didn't have any good thing like that happen. I was part of the family at that moment, right? I was in, and for a kid who did not feel like he was a part of his own family, who bounced between friend groups, who felt like he just was going to be on the edge of his life from that time forward, man, alcohol was a great solution because I knew that family was involved with alcohol. Right? And when I got the opportunity to take what I perceived to be my first drink in my friend's basement at 15 years old, and Jack Daniels is my first drink and it's my last drink, man, I was in at that moment. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing or where we were going to end up, but I was in, right? And I loved alcohol, right? Alcohol did for me what I could not figure out how to do for myself. And the minute I stepped onto a college campus and I'm this awkward kid who doesn't know what's going on around him and doesn't really know how to fit in and has minimal education on how to be a real world human being. I was raised in a pretty unique bubble. Man, it was on, right? And I spent my first 10 days on a college campus blacked out. And I had no idea what alcoholism, I have no idea what is going on for me. And I managed to graduate and I have these life experiences. But when I find myself in treatment at 26 years old, not knowing I'm in treatment, right? I went sober. I didn't go intoxicated. I went sober. I didn't know that you were allowed to drink on the plane towards treatment. And I found myself in a treatment center in Arizona, and I have no idea what is wrong with me. I'm there because my anxiety and depression is what I think is wrong with me. And I land in a treatment center, and they're not going to really address my alcoholism. They're going to deal with some of my, we'll call it other things I have going on. But I sat with the doctor, and this is where my step one experience began, right? And it's an important piece of the story for me because I think what I'm about to share is what defines my alcoholism, right? And she asked me about my drinking, and I can't really give her a number because the way I've drank for a really long time at this point is I don't measure drinks, right? I have this water bottle on my desk. That's one drink to me. I have a mug on my desk, one drink, same thing, doesn't matter what's inside them. They're all one drink to me, right? And she explained to me a little bit how they quantify drinks. And she said the national average for drinks is 4 a week. That has never been my story, not once, right? I give her a number somewhere between 80 and 120. She tells me I might be an alcoholic. That might be the next step of my journey. And I think the amount of alcohol I consume is what makes me an alcoholic, right? I drink how my uncles drink. I drink how my family drinks. We get together, everyone brings a cooler of beer. That's their beer. We ain't drinking. The liquor is when we start drinking. I don't have any concept. I have no understanding of what alcoholism is as defined by Alcoholics Anonymous. And so my first trip through the steps, and I had a sponsor who took me through the work as best he could, right? And I had an experience and it changed my life, right? But when it came to the question of, are you an alcoholic? I just said yes, because I didn't know any different. Right? He didn't qualify. I mean, we shared some experiences, but he didn't qualify me in terms of when I start drinking, I can't stop. And when I'm stopped, I become so irritable, restless, discontented that I have to start again. It's not, am I going to start again? Or maybe I'll figure it out this time. It's like, I'm so uncomfortable in my own skin that I can't not drink. And that vicious cycle is what makes me an alcoholic. I did not have that experience when I walked in the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. That took 18 months for me to have that experience. Right. And so my first step experience of the quantities and how I drink is not what really kept me here for this period of time. Right. And it's not the way I take the guys that I sponsor through the work now. Right. And where we start, I always start in the doctor's opinion. Right. And I want to lay out, before I take a guy through step one, we have a conversation about two things. And the first is a spiritual contract built on spiritual consent. Right. Where that comes from is this idea that I'm going to share the truth with you out of love, right? Not out of judgment, not out of trying to get you sober or get you to act right or anything like that. That I am just going to walk shoulder to shoulder through this deal with you, and that it's always going to come from a place of love. Right. And then the second piece is I want you to understand that I identify as an alcoholic, and this is how I identify as an alcoholic, and this is my experience. And if you seem to think that you might be like me, then I might have a solution for you. And I try to leave it as open-ended as that. I've sponsored other guys who identify as marijuana addicts and heroin addicts and different avenues like that. But as an alcoholic, I got to be clear that this is my story. And if you identify with my story, then you might be like me. Right. And so when we get to the doctor's opinion, we're trying to see if that person identifies with my story. Because then if he can identify with my story, he might have a shot at taking the steps that I've taken. So we jump into the doctor's opinion, right? And I typically like to begin because in working with others, it talks about the more hopeless he feels, the better, right? That's where I start. I'm the guy. Let's talk about how hopeless you feel. Let's talk about the darkness. Let's talk about where you are, right? And there's a line there. An alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. Are you a man without hope? Is there no life for you outside of where you've ended up? You have no shot at sobriety at that point. If you're like me, if you're a guy who can't not drink, and when you get sober, you become so just itchy and miserable in your own skin that the only logical conclusion is that I will drink again. If you're like me in that regard, are you hopeless? Are you hopeless? Right. And I've experienced some people where they drink and they seem to have some kind of physical reaction to alcohol, and you get them sober and like they're good. I am not one of those guys. I've also experienced guys who are pretty darn miserable. They are just curmudgeon-y as all curmudgeon gets, but they drink one and they're like, I'm good. They don't even really like the experience with alcohol. I am not that guy. Right. So we have a conversation around the hopeless, nature of alcoholism, right? Are you that guy, right? And I move on with them. And this is the way I've been taken through the work, is the last page or the last paragraph, right? On that page XXV3I. And it says very explicitly, right? Drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. I don't like the effect produced by alcohol with one drink. I like the effect produced by alcohol with a lot of drinks. Right? I like the effect produced by alcohol where I throw up. I like the effect produced by alcohol where I black out. I like the effect produced by alcohol where I disappear from my friends and end up in strange places and do things that people are looking at me going, how are you doing that? Why are you doing that? How'd you end up there one more time? That's the effect I like, right? I like the effect of not knowing who I am or what my name is and seemingly functional to everyone else around me. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. I want to know what your life is like thinking that your life is normal. Tell me about how you've normalized your alcoholism, right? I'm the guy who, there's a time in college where we decided to steal a grill. We had no business stealing the grill. There was no point to it. But we wanted to steal the grill because then we would have a grill, and it seemed like a good idea at the time, right? And we end up getting the grill on the back of the truck, and it flips out, and the police come, and we all go hide, and the person who's driving the car gets the DUI. And I'm looking at that situation going, this is a normal Thursday night for Michael. This is a normal thing for a guy like me to be doing. I'm not worried about how my drinking's going. I'm not worried about the fact that I haven't spent a weekend without drinking in years at that point, that it's creeping into my daily life, that I missed a final the previous semester because of my drinking. And then given the opportunity to make it up, I missed it again. Like, I don't see how all of these things are stacking up as completely non-normal events. I think it's all normal. I think that everybody pre-games and then pre-games the pregame. I've shared stories with my family members, and they are appalled at some of the things that I've done to consume alcohol. And they can't even comprehend that. And to me, that's normal, right? We move from there to, they are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks. I got that underlined, highlighted, and written next to, because to me, this is the crux of my alcoholism. My sober condition, stone cold sober, for as long as I can remember, has been irritable, restless, and discontented. Sobriety is an incredibly uncomfortable situation for me. Right? Stone cold sober, I'm going to be busy trying to arrange my life. And when I'm sitting with a new guy and he's looking at his life going, I don't know what's wrong with me right now. I know I can't drink, and yet I can't sit here. Don't know where we're going, but we got to go. I get that. I know what that's like. Right? I did not know that that was the crux of my alcoholism. I did not know that's what Alcoholics Anonymous was going to treat. My first sponsor, it was kind of a check the box situation. It was, tell me about how you drink. Well, when I started drinking, I get a little thirstier. And from there, I get thirstier and thirstier and thirstier. And eventually something happens to the effect of either I go to bed or something happens in my life and I'm arrested from my drinking at that moment. And then I start again for some reason, unbeknownst to me, and the cycle repeats. And he was like, cool, you're an alcoholic, let's move on. And I did the rest of the steps, right? And I got really, really sick, stone cold sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I would go to a meeting when I felt like I needed a meeting. I made the amends. I felt better with the amends, but I wasn't sponsoring guys. I wasn't doing regular things regularly. And I was wondering why I was getting not the same experience that everyone else was getting. And the truth is I did not have an accurate understanding of what my condition was. I knew that I couldn't drink because I would get more drinking. I understand that, right? I understand the phenomenon of craving at a very intimate level when I look at my story. But I suffer the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction out of this world if I just do it my way one more time. If I can just figure out how to do sobriety Michael's way, we'll be okay. I won't be restless this time. I'll be satisfied with what comes. I've never been satisfied one moment from anything that's ever happened in my life. Right? There's always more. I always got to go chase the more. I've never been able to sit in my own skin and just be okay for the night. We got to go do something. I don't know what we got to do. We just got to go. Right? So we run through this. We run through what is your sober condition? What's the sense of ease and comfort that comes over you? How do you feel after you get those first couple drinks in you? You feel good. What happens next? Almost invariably, without any variation, from the alcoholics I sponsor, is I'm drinking, man. 3 drinks, I'm drinking, period. Right? The most uncomfortable thing I've ever had to do is take 2 drinks and stop. It's like a Band-Aid is being ripped off over and over and over and over, trying not to drink at that point. It's awful, right? From there, we roll into, and this is the way I've been sponsored, and it's kind of a crummy example, but I played tennis growing up, and we would train during the week, and on the weekend we would play matches, and then we'd come back. And the way I've been sponsored is we kind of dive in really deep on one topic, and then we go and we kind of apply it across the spectrum, and then we come back to an individual topic, right? And so from there, diving so deep into when I drink, I can't stop, and when I'm stopped, I become irritable, restless, discontent until I can drink again. We bounce back to the spiritual solution of alcoholism, right? And what's offered in Alcoholics Anonymous. And about halfway down through XXIX, it says something more than human power is needed to produce this essential psychic change. And I dive into a conversation, and this is what I've been taken through, is what is the psychic change? What is the spiritual experience that we're looking for? Do you have the power? How does lack of power show up in your world? And we dive into that, right? And from there we move, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, right? We jump to Bill's story, and I know some don't jump into Bill's story too quickly, or they leave it optional for their sponsees. I've been sponsored to look for how I show up in Bill's story, right? And the language is a little challenging at times, but there's some important things in there, right? That I've discovered for myself, and how do they apply to Michael, right? On the very first page, right? The very first page, he dives into the grandiosity of who he thinks he is, right? At the very bottom, my talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me at enterprises, which I would manage with the utmost assurance. And I read that and I don't know what that means, but all of a sudden I frame my story, or someone else frames their story for me around it, and I understand exactly what he's saying. I suffer from the idea that I am going to do the deal. Whatever the deal is, I'm going to be the guy to do the deal. I'm going to show up in a suit and tie, and I'm going to make it look really good, and I'm going to present a certain way, and everyone's going to be pleased, and there's going to be vast amounts of money, and the women are going to love me. And like, I am going to do this in such a way that is just spectacular beyond anything anyone else can dream up. And he clearly lays out, I imagined. It's just his thing. Like, that's all he thinks about, is how great he is. right? And from there, he launches into alcoholism, right? Like from that point forward, he goes into this story of drink took an important and exhilarating part in my life. Man, that's my story. The minute I got the first opportunity I got to drink in my buddy's basement, man, it was wonderful. The drinking was great too, but the 2-hour excursion to try to get alcohol as a 15-year-old and being in parts of the town that I shouldn't have been in, right? I loved that. I loved going to places that I shouldn't be, right? The chip on the shoulder kind of guy. Look at me, look at all that I'm doing. I love that. Right. And I love being a part of my friend group, and I love being able to drink more than anybody else there. I love being able to bounce back the next morning as if nothing happened the night before. I love puking around. Like I love everything that comes with this deal because I think it makes me something. I think that it makes me somebody. Right. My drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. The way I frame this with guys, I get sponsor a lot of guys. I got sober pretty young at 26, right? I sponsor a lot of guys. How did your drinking get more serious? My drinking was not very serious to begin with. 5 drinks in my buddy's basement on one Saturday in June. Notice how I can give you all the details of my first drinks and the exact tally I had, right? I didn't pass out. I didn't throw up. I didn't do anything crazy. I took care of people, right? I went to bed. But how does my drinking get more serious? 10 days blacked out, pretty serious. It was twice a week after that. That's only 3 years later. By the time I'm graduating, I'm drinking 5 or 6 nights a week. I can't hold the job. I bounce between cities. I use up people's goodwill with me. By the time I'm being and like going to treatment, not knowing I'm going to treatment, not even knowing what treatment is, not knowing what alcoholism is. I've not left my apartment other than to go to the fast food joint or the liquor store to go pick up tobacco. Those are the only 3 times I leave my apartment for the previous 9 months. I have a job and it's commission based, so they think I'm doing a good job, but I lie about all my work appointments. They rarely see me, if ever. The only times they do see me is if there's drinking involved, because I show up early and I leave early. Right? I got to make an appearance. I got to keep up faces. They don't know where I am or what I'm doing. I don't sleep regular hours. Right? That is a far cry from a kid who's experimenting with alcohol one time in his friend's basement. Right? I became a lone wolf. Right? Tell me about your lone wolfness. I can be a lone wolf in a bar very easily. I can be a chameleon. I can float. That's not what qualifies me as a lone wolf. Tell me about your life. Tell me about how you show up. Tell me about the things that you do, thinking that others are only interfering with how you're showing up. Right? That's my story. Stay out of my life. You stay to the edges. Right? Let me do what I want to do. Right? And he continues, right? I woke up. This had to be stopped. Tell me about your experiences with trying to stop. Tell me about your experiences with when I woke up that morning after doing it one more time, with waking up in her bed that she wasn't my girlfriend. Tell me about this can go so many different ways. Tell me about your experience with waking up saying, I can't do this one more time. Right. And from there, we can have a conversation. What happened next? Almost every time the next words out of my mouth are, I started drinking again. I can't not drink. Right. Because the way that I've been sponsoring this deal and what we're setting the table for is I can't not drink. But I also know that on the other side of drinking is more drinking. It's the jumping off place. It is firmly establishing that to continue in with the thinking and the solution of, I can figure out how not to drink, or I can manage my drinking, which I'll get to when there's a solution. That between those two things, there's got to be an avenue out of that. There's got to be another way. Right. And what I've experienced is that middle ground, that way out, right, which is unrelated to the two that are there, is the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. The path to freedom is not by solving those two impossible equations for a guy like me, but it is leaning into the third solution, which is to do all 12 steps as they're outlined in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. Right. Bill's story continues, right? And he has the experience with Ebby and sitting at his kitchen counter, and this guy who's clearly sober and has somehow changed his life, and he drops a line of, "I've got religion," and immediately my whole body erupts, and this will never work for a guy like me. I'm not even an atheist or an agnostic. I just am so resentful at all of religion and all of God and all of that, that even to suggest that to a guy like me is like, man, you have just offended the priest. Of I'm so offended that you would even suggest something like this. And the conversation ends. And if someone had not offered an alternative solution at this moment in my sobriety, I wouldn't be sitting here today. If he hadn't said, "That's fine, I don't believe you, that we're good, we don't have to talk about God, we're good," I wouldn't be sitting here, right? I would have disappeared a long time ago if it was about that. And I've been jumped through this, right, to this right here. God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Right? And he removed from me that this was a good and bad situation. That if I just had acted better, if I just had applied a little bit more of the spiritual high ground that my parents had tried to instill in me, that I wouldn't be here as an alcoholic. That I wouldn't be having to go through this deal, that I could go live life normally like everyone else that I think is living a normal life. Right? He gave me an opportunity to see, man, this is just about you being a sick man. This is about, are you sick? Yay or nay? If you're sick, we got a plan to get you better, right? To get you well. We don't really have a plan to get you acting right. We don't have a plan to get you into heaven, but we got a plan to treat your alcoholism. Are you in or not? Right? And I got shifted into the last part of Bill's story, right? Where he talks about, find it real quick. Right. On page 13, he says, "At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time." And so begins his journey. Right. And the next page on 13, and his experience after that is my experience in the steps. Right. He outlines what he did as a step, a plan of recovery as outlined in step work. But that piece about needing to be separated from alcohol was a really important piece in his story. I had to be separated from alcohol, even though I didn't know I needed to be separated from alcohol. Right? I think I just need to throw a little God on there. I'll pray a little bit. I'll act a little better, and I won't be an alcohol. And that's not Bill's story. Right? I had to be separated from alcohol. That's my story. They locked me in a level 1 psychological hospital where I had no access to a wallet or money. And in order to leave, I had to sign away a couple of rights and release liability on them. Like it was a pretty severe situation to be awakening to. And I needed to be separated from alcohol, where it wasn't even in the county. It wasn't around, you know, and not knowing that was the case for a guy like me. Right. And that's Bill's story, is he had to be locked up and separated so that at that point, a spiritual solution can be entered. Right. And that's what I share with the guys that I sponsored. Where are we at with sobriety right here, right now? I've sponsored guys who have tried the marijuana maintenance program, and I don't hear a lot from them, right? I don't see them. We don't really do step work. We don't really have that conversation. They tell me how they're sober and they're doing a good job, and that's their business. That's not my business, right? But for those that I've worked with who have been separated from alcohol, a spiritual solution has a real shot if they start identifying, right? That's my experience here. So I jump from there and we roll into there's a solution, and this is I'm running out of time. There's a whole lot in step one, and I'll bring up a couple things in there's a solution, right? And at the second to last paragraph on the first page, like I hear a lot of times, and I can sometimes be guilty of it, is like the bond that we share is how we drink. And it's clearly outlined here, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined, right? We are all showing up, whatever your time zone, like on a Friday for me at noon, to be here in Alcoholics Anonymous because of the solution, not because of our story of drinking, right? What binds me to you is that we have found this way out to a life that is beyond anything that I can comprehend, a level of connection with a power that I do not understand and can't comprehend beyond my wildest dream. Like I'm the guy who knows there's a God, but can't get connected to it. And somehow, some way, by being with a bunch of strangers, I get connected to the power almost instantaneously. And I say almost because there's still a little fear that you're not going to like me, or that I'm going to say something stupid. But I get the power through being here with you, with being with a new guy, with trying to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like all of a sudden, the power is in me in a way that I can't understand. If it was just a matter of us getting together and talking about how we drink, I'm probably not sticking around very long, to be honest with you. That's not very interesting to me. I'd rather just go drink, right? And the line below that, a tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. I have nothing unique about my solution. I wish it was. I wish there was something that I could offer you that would give me glory and make me feel tremendous about myself as a unique individual. There is nothing. It is just generic, straight out of the book experience. This is what it says. This is my experience with it. That's it. Right. I move guys from there, and right. We're talking about, we're starting to get into how do we treat alcoholism, right? And there's on page 21, right? We start getting into what is an like as it's outlined in the book. What is an alcoholic, right? How do we identify, right? And at various stages, I can identify with the moderate drinker, or thinking I'm a moderate drinker, or the hard drinker. But I can tell you that there are important pieces in each of those that don't apply to me, right? If a sufficiently strong reason becomes operative, this man can stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome. I have yet to find a sufficient reason not to drink, right? Whether it's a legal trouble, whether it's financial trouble, whether it's her trouble, whether it's family trouble, like I have never found a reason to altogether just be like, I'm not drinking anymore, I'm good, right? The question is always, how can I make this go away? And I'm going to be drinking again. It's just a matter of time, right? It's never once been that. So we get into the alcoholic side of it, and it's at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink, right? I know that feeling. I know the feeling that at the start of one, I'm looking forward to having a drink. And somehow by about 3/4 of the way down in that drink, man, I'm thirstier. And it is a physical, there's a response that my body has, that when the book says that his body is as sickened as his mind, When I have the experience of getting thirstier towards the end of one, I know I need, like, I got to have another drink. There is a craving inside me that I got to have another drink, right? He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. Let's talk about it. Tell me about the things you've done. I've probably done quite a few of them, right? Let's talk about them. Let's have an experience talking about the incredible, tragic things that we think are normal, right? He frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. That is me. I have written next to that, me. I am that guy, right? I can be nice to you for a while, but if that's all we got to do right here, there's an exit strategy for me, because I can't stand being around you sober. I can't stand being around you at this level of drunkenness, right? I got to go get more. Right? I move them to, right, page 23. And it says, these observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Right? They're laying out for us, hey, if you just don't drink, you're good. And then they follow that up with, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. And it's like, oh, now I'm screwed, right? I went from being good to now I've got a really big problem, because all you're telling me is I'm left with what's between my ears, and I can't stand what's between my ears. I can't stand being in the same room with other people and how they show up, right? And all I do is I think and I think and I think and I think. Right? Once this malady has a real hold, they are baffled a lot. There's the obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game, right? And from there, and I'm skipping over there as a solution, but a lot of times we jump into on page 30, right? The great obsession of every abnormal drinker. And what is that? Right? The great obsession that I've experienced is that simultaneously, both being true, that I will enjoy my drinking and I will control it. The way that I enjoy my drinking is there is no control. And the way I control my drinking is absolutely the worst experience I can dream up. That statement is not true for me. It has been explicitly pointed out that the and means that they are both true at the same time. Not once has that been my experience. Right? The delusion, and if that's true for you, like it's true for me, the delusion that we are like other people or presently may be has to be smashed. Today, in my shoes, I am not like other people. I am still every bit as alcoholic today as I was 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 years ago. The idea that because I'm sober and that I get this life that is wonderful and that I actually showed up for work today, and they tell me that they're happy that I showed up for work and that I met with a sponsee this morning, like the fact that I get to do those things does not turn me into normal people. It doesn't make me like them. The fact is that I will never be like them. I am always going to be the guy that is an alcoholic. I am always going to be the guy that when I start drinking, I can't stop. And that if you just left me to my own devices without Alcoholics Anonymous, without these actions that I take on a regular basis, that I would go back to being the guy that is absolutely miserable in my own skin, miserable in my sobriety. That is 100% true. Right? On page, to flip back briefly, page 25, it says, there's a solution. And then it tells me that I'm going to hate it. Right? It tells me point blank that not only do I hate it, that you're going to hate it too, and that there's going to be resistance to what we're going to offer here. Right? Self-searching, leveling of my pride, confession of shortcomings. that are required in order for the process to be successful. Right? Those aren't if I hit those 3 benchmarks, then I'll be good. I've tried that in sobriety. That's not been has not worked very well for me. Right. What's worked for me is to do all of it. And those things are a part of it. And I don't like it. And I am resistant to it. I am resistant. And maybe this is blaspheming, and I'm going to close up in 1 second, that every time I meet with a new guy, I don't want to be meeting with the new guy. I wish I was thoughtful and caring and considerate enough to want to meet with the new guy. It's inconvenient. You're in my way. This is not what I planned on doing today. I'm uncomfortable. I don't know how this guy is going to like me or not, or whether or not I'm a good sponsor. Like it is a brutal 15-second experience. Right. But the process requires that. It requires the inconvenience. It requires me to show up regardless of how I feel about it, how I think about it, what's going on with me, because that guy is dying of alcoholism. The same way that when I met with my sponsor for the first time, I'm dying of alcoholism. And he sat with me no matter what. And he has continued to sit with me no matter what. Right? That is what this process requires. I want to jump to one other thing and more about alcoholism before I move into the last thing I want to close with, right? And the way I've experienced more about alcoholism is that they're giving us all of the examples of how I can do it on my own, and that probably ain't going to be a great game plan for a guy like me, right? They give me the game plan on how to moderate my drinking and all those examples, and we have a conversation around how I don't do those very well, right? Between switching from other alcohol forms to how I'm going to only drink after this time or not before that time or only in these locations. Like we get to do all of that, right? And we have an experience with that, but we talk about the absurd ways that in sobriety, I try to keep myself sober, right? In sobriety, I try to do it my way, not a cloud on the horizon. A little bit of resentment, not really resentment, just a little bit of irritation. Like we go through these examples of how in sobriety, like I'm going to do it Michael's way. And I'm really not all that interested in the solution that you've outlined, right? That if I just arrange it just right one more time, that, man, I'll be able to figure it out. And the way they wrote it, it is so uniquely useful for a guy like me, because I'm going to look for every other opportunity to go some different direction than to just be on the spiritual path. Right. And we land in this place. On page 43, and it's the last paragraph here. And it says, once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink, except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. And at this point in the conversation with the sponsee, right, at this point in the conversation, I start blending in the fact that I am powerless over alcohol and that my life is unmanageable. Today, my life is unmanageable. Right here, right now, my life is unmanageable, right? And I start blending that, and the blend is lack of power. That was our dilemma, right? That my step one extends into we agnostics, right? That if step one is, and I hear it a lot, that it's the only one we got to do perfectly. It's 100%. Like if my step one is true, that I am powerless over alcohol at such an intimate level that I don't even use hand sanitizer, right? For me, that's my story. Like I don't even do that, right? If that is true for me, if I am that powerless over alcohol and that my life is unmanageable, stone cold sober in my shoes, right? That as best I can, any management left up to Michael is just not going to work, right? If that's true, and the only solution is a higher power, then the connection is that lack of power is my dilemma. I don't have power. Right? We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? And then we go into step two. Right? We start looking at how and where can I get connected? And thank you for letting me be here. I know that was grossly insufficient for step one, and I hope you all found something out of that. And I will shut up now.